Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. Today I am bringing to you the most tactical, or maybe not so cool knife that you'll probably see on the internet this week, and that is of course the Kershaw XCOM model 3425. So, quick prediction, my crystal ball tells me that Kershaw is going to sell these by the truckload. I think this is a very marketable design. I think it's one that has a huge market, and they're just going to sell a ton of them. My experience with this knife was really bad, and it could be just my example, and I'll touch on that a little bit as we get into it, but not very good. So let's start with basic specs, as we always do. And then I'll talk to you specifically about my testing, my experience, and my overall thoughts on the Kershaw XCOM. So this knife came out this year in 2019. And as of filming this on June 22nd, I can only find one review on YouTube by Gideon's Tactical. It's a channel that I subscribe to. There's a couple other videos, but they're like 1 or 2 minute kind of overviews. And so not a lot yet on YouTube on this knife. Again, it's pretty new for 2019. So what we're looking at here is a folder, obviously. And this is kind of styled after the old World War II trench knives. And it's kind of being marketed as a EDC folder with some tactical inspiration and functionality. And so it's kind of trying to do two things, I think. And in my experience, it didn't really do either of them well for me. So let me talk through that here in a minute, but quick specs on this guy. Overall length is 8 inches. Your blade length is going to be just over 3.5 inches, and that's going to be 8CR13 MOV steel. The price on this guy is about $28. As you can see, that blade shape is a dagger style with that large unsharpened swedge up top. And then from the kind of the apex of the dagger down to your actual secondary bevel or your cutting edge is a flat grind. And of course it's coated in black. Everything is black on black on black. Very tactical looking. And I'll be honest with you, the reason I bought this knife to begin with is that as a kid, because this really isn't my style, black blades, not a huge fan, tactical type self-defense blades, not really my thing, but nostalgia kind of took over for me when I was looking online, because I owned so many knives like this when I was a kid that looked something like this, little boot knives, fixed blades, folders, and so it just reminded me of the type of knife that I would have bought 10 years ago. And there's nothing wrong with having an interest in this knife or purchasing this knife as an adult. I did, right? I bought this knife hoping it would be a decent little $28 Chinese import Kershaw. So anyway, that's kind of the story behind why I chose to purchase this, because based on what you've maybe seen on my channel, this isn't really my bag necessarily, but I digress. So we talked about the blade, about 3.5 inches, 8CR13 dagger style blade. The handle length on this guy is just under 4.5 inches, so that's going to give you your total overall length of 8 inches. The weight comes in at 4.2 ounces. Your handle material is going to be a glass-filled nylon, so it's a plastic type of material. And again, at this price point, 8CR13 and glass-filled nylon, pretty typical for Kershaw on these budget imports. So nothing crazy going on yet, right? All pretty straightforward. The frame does have some steel liners, and it's hard to see them because they're blacked out. It is a liner lock. It has a pocket clip, and it deploys manually with a thumb disc. So it's not a speed safe. It is a manual opener using that thumb disc. And that's kind of the very basics of what we're looking at here. Also, if I didn't mention already, it was designed by Les George. And as far as kind of your ambidextrous features and functionality for you lefties, the pocket clip is swappable from one side to the other, and using that dual thumb disc, definitely friendly for the left-handed user. So in basic concept, I guess it's not bad, but in execution and performance is where I had some major issues. So let me talk about the performance issues that I had first. This blade shape, this style of blade, a dagger blade, is really best suited for one thing, and that's piercing, right? It's kind of a fighting knife, if you will. The way these dagger style grinds are done, just the geometry behind it, doesn't make it very conducive as a slicer. So I took this thing to some cardboard. I had quite a bit of it to break down for recycling, and I just went to town, put it in the hammer grip, which is actually quite comfortable. And I just went to town through some cardboard, and I got through about 25 linear feet of cardboard before it lost its working edge. So the 8 Sierra 13 on this knife is not good. Not that 8 Sierra 13 is an awful steel. I'm not a steel snob. I probably have upwards of 50 or more knives in 8CR, and some has done better than others. And my example did not hold its edge for more than really like 8 or 9 minutes. So it lost that working edge pretty quickly. When testing this on things like paper and on an apple, it really doesn't do well as a slicer. Again, being a dagger style blade geometry, the thickest part of your blade is that line right down the center, and it's 0.15 inches in thickness. And then your cutting edge sits, about a half an inch from there. So you're going from your thinnest portion, which is your secondary grind or your bevel or your edge. You're going from there to your thickest point in a very short distance, right? Compare that to something, what do I have nearby? A paramilitary 2, where you go from your thinnest portion to your fattest portion over a longer distance, right? So this is going to slice much better, obviously. So as a slicer, not good at all. Just geometrically, it's just not. It'll open a box just fine. It'll cut a string. It's 8 Sierra 13, so it is what it is. As an EDC knife, it might get you by, but it would by no means be my first, second, third, or probably 100th choice as an EDC, just because that blade geometry doesn't really lend itself to EDC tasks, in my opinion. It's definitely more tactical self-defense, in my opinion. So that's one issue I had, is just performance as an EDC. It's just not good, and I didn't expect it to be, frankly. I'm just kind of sharing my experience with you. And again, I bought it more on nostalgia than anything, not as a defensive folder. The second major issue that I have with this is in its fit and finish. So the blade, if you can tell, and it's kind of hard to because it's all black, it is all the way off to the right-hand side, like as far as it can possibly go. So the centering, it literally can't get any worse than that, in that the blade, and you'll probably be able to hear this, is rubbing on the handle scale. So it can't, even if I push, it won't go any further that direction. So the centering is as bad as it can possibly be. And if I pull the blade back, to the left side or towards center and let it go, it just springs right back to the far right-hand side. And I was unable to adjust that using the pivot screw here. You can see my multiple attempts with the markings there from my Torx driver, because it just spun and spun and spun. So I think this pivot here is supposed to be captive and not move, but it just spins and spins and spins. So maybe a quality control issue with the pivot on my particular example, I'm not sure. And having said that, let me quickly pause and say this. I have a sample size of 1, right? This is the one Kershaw XCOM that I have. So I can only base my opinions and experience on my opinions and experience with this knife. So just bear that in mind, that there may be other examples out there that are better. But if there are, it doesn't really inspire much confidence for me personally, because if they are putting out examples that are perfectly centered, that have pivots that can be adjusted, then that just tells me the quality control is so far out of bounds that I personally wouldn't want to even try to replace it, because I may get another one like this, or I may get another one that's a little better. But again, it wouldn't be worth it for me to try to track down a good one, if that makes sense. So quality control, just really poor, I think. And in my experience with the Kershaw imports that I've handled in the last probably 5 to 8 years, that's kind of been the case. They've kind of, for the most part, disappointed me. The other main issue, and this is the biggest issue by far with this knife, is the lockup. So the liner lock actually locks up not bad, probably 40%, something like that. Quite strong. Up and down, I'm getting nothing whatsoever. But I'm not going to touch this liner lock, and I'm going to close this knife. Let me do that one more time in case you missed it. And this isn't, magic, illusion, trickery. I'm not going to touch the liner lock, and I'm going to close the knife. So how was I able to do that? I was able to do that because there is so much side-to-side play in this knife, more so than I've ever experienced on any knife ever. And this is the way it came straight out of the box. So if I can demonstrate this, you can probably see that the tang of the blade is basically touching the scale on the right-hand side. And as I rock it, you can see it moving back and forth from left to right. So a tremendous amount of blade play left to right or side to side. And what that creates is an opportunity for this liner lock to be defeated with the addition of lateral forces. So if I put lateral force in to my right in that direction, because there's so much play, I can actually just simply defeat that lock and close the knife without actually depressing the liner lock. And where that could be an issue is obviously if you're using this as a tactical folder or as a self-defense knife, I just wouldn't trust it, frankly, because if you get enough lateral force, it could potentially close on you. And that's no good if, A, you could hurt yourself, and B, if this was some sort of a defensive tool and it closes on you, then that's not good either. So the fact that I can so easily defeat that liner lock because of that side-to-side play, for me, makes this a complete no-go and potentially even unsafe. So for that reason, based on the one example that I have, I can't recommend it, obviously, because of my experience. Again, yours may vary depending on the quality control of the knife that you happen to get, but I just simply can't recommend it based on my sample size of one. So take that for what it's worth. If you like the design and you want to buy one, they're $28, $27. So worst case scenario, you're out $28, which is kind of how I feel at this point. And frankly, I'm probably not going to return it just because the return policy, Blade HQ, for $26, $27, I'll just hang on to it or throw it away probably. Because I would not likely give this away because, again, I feel like there's some safety concerns with being able to close the knife with very little effort by defeating that liner lock. So don't recommend it based on my experience. Yours may vary, but I will say this. If you're looking for any sort of self-defense folder to carry as a primary or secondary self-defense tool, I would highly caution you against this knife. If you're in EMS, law enforcement, military, I would personally, if it were me, I would just stay away because the quality control, I think, is a major issue and it could give you problems. I think there's better options for you if that's your intention for how you would use this knife. And when I first saw these, that's kind of what I thought. And I was talking to a subscriber about this knife, actually, and we were saying it might be a good option as kind of a backup, last-ditch defensive tool for somebody in the military or law enforcement community. And it's not. I mean, it's really not. And I certainly would not recommend it in that use. The other thing that's odd about the design to me, again, being kind of a tactically inspired design, is the pocket clip is very deep ride, and it's a good pocket clip. It carries really well, but if you were going to use this for self-defense, generally speaking, my preference and my recommendation is to never have a truly deep carry pocket clip on a primary self-defense weapon, because it makes it more challenging to access. So I would want at least a half an inch or more coming out of my pocket so that I could draw it very, very quickly and easily. So I don't really understand that kind of conceptually why they would put a deep ride clip on a knife like this. I know deep ride clips are fun and everybody likes them, but to me it doesn't fit on this style of knife. But again, I think they're going to sell a ton of them. I have predicted to a few friends of mine that I think they'll actually probably come out with another version in Speed Safe, and I wouldn't be shocked to see a fixed blade version of this as well, because despite what I think are some kind of fatal flaws, at least with my example, I think it's going to sell like absolute crazy. So if you like the design, you think it's cool looking, and you want to take a chance on it for 26 bucks, 27 bucks, by all means go for it. But just know that you may get one like I got, or you may get one that's far better. And in that case, you know, to each their own. So those are my thoughts on the Kershaw XCOM. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, as always, and I'll talk to you soon.